Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Freely Nourish, the podcast that empowers you to break the cycle of dieting by teaching you to nourish your body well. I am your host, registered dietitian Erin Casey, and I'm also the owner of New You Nutrition Counseling, where we believe that you can reach any of your healthcare goals at just about any body size. So if you are ready to break free from that toxic and shameful spiral that is diet culture and welcome or join a community of fellow-minded thinkers, join us. You can join us via one-on-one counseling, as we always have offered. We also have a brand new membership option that allows you to connect with me, but also connect with other members. It is a monthly membership program, so all of the details can be found on our website. I also posted a promo podcast about it, I think 3 episodes ago. I'll post it. I'll copy it below in the show notes. But basically, it's a monthly membership. We have monthly group calls. You also have access to a private Facebook group that is accessed only by other members. And then we will do, of course, 4 workshops every year. So right now we are halfway through 2023. So there will only be 2 more left in this year, but then going forward, we will have 4 every single year from there on out. There is some specialty pricing because we are starting in the middle of the year. So check all of that out on the website, on our past podcast episode. We would love to have you. This is your community of your folks who are also looking to break out of diet culture. Most of us live our day-to-day lives surrounded by diet culture and surrounded by people who are embedded in it. And it can be really tough when you're trying to improve your relationship with food and improve your relationship with your body. And all you are finding is just people who are either trying to correct you, give you information you did not ask for, tear you down, etc. So this community is meant to help kind of support those goals in ways in which your coworkers, even family, friends, etc., may not be able to. So join us. It's a worthwhile endeavor. You won't regret it. And today, what I wanted to talk to you about is something I get the most questions about, of people who come through my doors who are potentially looking to lose weight and want to do it in a sustainable manner. They've tried everything, and what they're finding is that their body is just not shrinking in the way that they had hoped it would. And there's a lot to be said about, well, maybe bodies aren't meant to shrink, and perhaps your body is just meant to be that size. And those things still hold true. And there are other factors that can impact our weight that sometimes can be an indicator that something is wrong. And most of us have kind of heard the terminology of hormones or endocrine function being thrown around as a potential culprit for this, and it is. But we don't really know kind of where to go or what to think about it. So today I wanted to kind of just, again, this is a podcast, right? This is not meant to diagnose or treat any individual issues. It's certainly not meant to supplement, personalized, individualized medical care. What it is meant to do is help educate you on some of the more common issues that I see and kind of ways that you can advocate for yourself in the context of your own healthcare team to get yourself the care that you need. So what I decided to do is kind of map out just a couple of the most common hormone disorders that I see, what types of diagnostic testing is often done to diagnose them, and then kind of, what, if anything, nutritionally we do about it. So the first one, which is probably the most common, is your thyroid. So your thyroid is a little gland that is actually very, very important in terms of the function of your overall metabolism and your metabolic rate. So your thyroid puts out signaling molecules called T3 and T4 that govern basically how efficiently, but also just how much your metabolism runs. It's a lot more complicated than that, but that's kind of my 2-second synopsis for the sake of this podcast. Thyroids can be both underactive and overactive. Overactive thyroid, there's actually a little less to do about that because it's just kind of, you just have more of the hormones circulating through your body. Underactive, we want to make sure that we bring that activity up to baseline. So what underactive thyroid can cause, it basically causes your metabolism to slow down, is what the long and the short of that is. That causes a number of things, not the least of which is that you are typically exhausted. That's a really, really common effect of your thyroid being low function, is that you're really, really tired, but it also lowers your metabolism. So the very last podcast actually that I did was all about reverse dieting, and in it I talked quite a bit about something called your BMR, or your basal metabolic rate. In some cases it's also referred to as your RMR, or resting metabolic rate. Those two things are the same thing. But basically, that is the amount of calories your body needs to just kind of sustain life. It doesn't really have anything to do with your activity or your exercise. It's just kind of how many calories your body needs in a day to just vibe, so to speak, right? And when your thyroid function is low, what happens is that RMR, or that BMR, comes down significantly. So your body is burning significantly fewer calories at rest. And as a result, your BMR can kind of fall well under how much you're eating, because your BMR can be at like 900 calories a day. That's how many calories your body is burning. That's why you're so tired, because your body's not able to make use of calories. But then if you're eating even a moderate amount of calories, like 1,500, 1,800, 2,000 calories, you're going to gain weight. And it's not because you're eating more, it's because your metabolism has slowed. So typical blood tests to look for, and again, talk to your healthcare provider about this, but if you're really tired, if you've experienced kind of seemingly rapid and like otherwise unexplained weight gain, thyroid function is probably something that they would agree is something to look at. Typically, there are a couple of labs that we look at. One is called TSH, which is your thyroid stimulating hormone. 9 times out of 10, if something is wrong with your thyroid, something is going to be off with your TSH. That said, it can happen where the TSH is normal and there's an error either in the actual signaling, like you have enough TSH to stimulate your thyroid, but your thyroid is just unable to produce T4 or T3, which are the downstream signaling molecules. That's a little bit more rare, but it does happen. Some people too are able, the signaling molecule is fine, so the stimulating hormone is fine. They're producing plenty of T4, but your body actually converts a certain portion of T4 into T3, and that's kind of the most metabolically active component. So some people, what the error is in that conversion from T4 to T3. So there are, and there's also, they may want to test something like anti-thyroid antibodies. That basically would look for autoimmune diseases, Hashimoto's probably being the most common, where basically your immune system is attacking your thyroid, and that's why it's slowing down. It just kind of gives us another layer of understanding as to what's going on. More often than not, the solution is the same. It's going to be a replacement of T4 or T3 or both, to improve that thyroid function, basically take the edge off of how much your thyroid is actually being asked to do. In the case of like Hashimoto's and stuff like that, you are at an increased risk for thyroid tumors and things like that. There also, thyroid tumors can also cause that. So even if you're, more often than not, if there's a tumor in there, your labs are going to be wonky, but they also may do like feeling around of it. They may do an ultrasound, things like that too, to kind of, get a better handle on it. If it's something that's, they think puts you at risk, they may take your thyroid out, in which case you have no thyroid function. But fortunately, there are lots of medications that can help correct for that. So that's kind of your thyroid in a nutshell. It's typically it's very manageable and very treatable. And then kind of, if your concern is weight loss, once you get all of that leveled out, then it does become an issue of, okay, well then now, normal rules apply, calories in, calories out, deficits, surplus, all that good fun stuff. I will say that, if you lose your thyroid entirely, like if they surgically remove it, then you kind of, find your fixed level of medication and you're done. If you have a thyroid and it's just kind of under functioning, you may be in for some rounds of medication adjustment, just to kind of, your thyroid function may kind of ebb and flow a little bit, and you may be kind of chasing that with medication changes. So that's just kind of something to be aware of. And the other major hormone that I hear a lot about is cortisol. Honestly, cortisol is it is pretty rare for cortisol to be out of line. Like it happens. There are diseases where it happens. Absolutely. There are, so one's Addison's disease and the other is Cushing syndrome. Those are the kind of like the two main. But cortisol is kind of what we refer to as a stress hormone. So it is the hormone that your body circulates when it is in kind of a heightened state of threat. The way I like to think about cortisol is that we evolved mostly with having to survive physical threats. Okay. And we think about our lives today, most of the threats that we have, or most of the things that cause us stress they're not threatening our physical safety. It's job stress, it's kid stress, it's interpersonal stress with relationships and things like that. There are very few things that threaten most of our physical safety on a day-to-day basis. But that said, our body doesn't have an adaptive system yet to handle that differently. So it adapted to stress means physical stress, which means we have to be ready to break away from something, right? We have to get up and go. So it's going to hold on to fat stores better. It's going to slow down digestion. It's going to, increase your heart rate, constrict your blood vessels, do all kinds of things to where you can physically move faster. But again, most of us aren't having to do that. So if your cortisol's out of whack, yeah, you're definitely going to either gain weight or hold on to weight and it's going to be really hard to lose weight. Things that you can do for cortisol, it kind of depends on if it's elevated is usually when there's a problem. And it depends what's elevating it. So there is a condition called Cushing syndrome, where your body just creates too much cortisol at baseline. It's, from what I understand, a genetic condition. So there's not really anything to do to cure it. There are medications that you can take to kind of lower that cholesterol production at baseline. But definitely people with Cushing syndrome will notice that they gain weight very easily. They have a very hard time losing it. And it can be a challenge. If there is no real underlying issue, it's just kind of your cortisol level is elevated because you're just in a heightened state of stress. It's definitely worth taking a look at the things in your life that are creating stress. Are there relationships that are maybe toxic to you that maybe you don't need to be a part of anymore? Is your job truly, this is a justification for your job is impacting your health, right? And we live in this capitalist society where we feel our jobs and our careers are everything to us, but if it's coming at the detriment of your health, I'm not telling everybody to go quit your job, but it's worth evaluating. If that's something that you cannot make the job a better job, you can't make it a less stressful job, it's worth evaluating, because this is your health that we're talking about. The other things that you can do, exercise regularly will help you downregulate cortisol. That's definitely a big part of it. Getting adequate sleep, getting adequate water, not drinking alcohol, not smoking, those kinds of things will add to your cortisol levels. Eating regular meals, eating nourishing meals, kind of a good variety of antioxidants, all of our normal, good, healthy habits will help to reduce cortisol levels. But again, if it's a significant stressor, it might be worth evaluating what that stressor is and whether or not that's something you want to continue to have in your life. Another major hormone is insulin. So insulin, and specifically insulin resistance, can have a huge impact on weight. Namely, again, kind of the reason why your body circulates insulin is that it needs more fuel. And if that insulin is kind of coming back empty because, your body's resistant to it or whatever the case may be, it's going to kind of cue starvation, which again is a physical threat as far as your body is concerned. What can happen very often is that, for reasons we don't fully understand, I want to be clear. I think there's a lot of information and misinformation out there about insulin resistance and how it's basically, a lifestyle disease. It's, it is a precursor to type 2 diabetes. That much is true. But honestly, the causes behind it, the medical field has really failed to draw a line or a connection between pure lifestyle or even body weight and insulin resistance. What they have actually done is done a really good job of testing for insulin resistance in fat people and not testing for insulin resistance in skinny people, and led us all astray to believe that like somehow being fat made you more prone to insulin resistance, when in fact it was just because you were fat, because of biases in the healthcare system. You were tested and somebody else wasn't. But what we're finding now is that as we're testing A1C measures and things like that more routinely, it's affecting a lot of skinny people too. So it really doesn't have nearly as much to do with your body weight, definitely not. Lifestyle factors like exercise, overall diet quality, hydration, sleep, all of those things, stress, can also impact insulin's function as well. So taking a good look at all of those things can definitely help. That said, the way you test for insulin resistance is not through your blood sugar. So I think that's a really big misconception. People think that if their blood sugar is elevated or something like that, that's the way you would tell insulin resistance. Not necessarily. Your blood sugar goes up and down all day long. Really the only way to test for insulin resistance is to test fasting insulin, which is not a routine lab that is run. You typically will have to ask your healthcare provider specifically to test for for fasting insulin. Sometimes they will do something that's called an A1C, which is a 3-month average of your blood sugar. So the relationship between blood sugar and insulin is that as your blood sugar rises, your body circulates insulin to basically work as kind of a little shuttle to carry that sugar that's in your bloodstream from your digestive tract. So you eat food, it gets absorbed through your digestive tract, and now it's in your blood. And then your pancreas secretes insulin to basically carry that blood sugar that's in your blood into your muscle cells, as well as other cells, just so that your body can use it as fuel. What happens in the case of insulin resistance, and even in some cases of type 2 diabetes, is that carrier molecule, the insulin, it just doesn't work as well. It's not able to carry the blood sugar where it needs to go. So that sugar, instead of going from your bloodstream into your muscle cells, stays in your bloodstream. And that's why you wind up with high blood sugar. However, because your body's very adaptive and very good at adjusting to circumstances, sometimes when it senses that your blood sugar is high, it will just start cranking out more and more insulin. Sometimes adding more and more insulin is kind of like, okay, it may take 2 insulin molecules per molecule of sugar to get it across the barrier, but it's still doing it, right? So the blood sugar may actually come down to normal. That means that your A1C would be normal. It also means that your blood sugar, your fasting blood sugar, would be normal. But you were creating, double the amount of insulin that would be normal to create that effect. And in doing so, your pancreas is working really, really hard. So it is absolutely possible that your fasting insulin will be elevated, and having that insulin elevated is also going to create other downstream effects in terms of fat gain and things like that. But your blood sugar and your A1C are actually normal. So if you really suspect that, fasting insulin is an issue, or that, insulin resistance is an issue for you, but your blood work is coming back normal, at least according to your doctor, ask them to run fasting insulin. That might be something to look into. And then, and I will say too that like as things progress, so like as insulin resistance becomes worse, those other metrics, your body won't be able to produce enough insulin to lower your blood sugar back into the normal range. So eventually your blood sugar will come up, but it is possible that to catch it in the early stages, you may have to check fasting insulin in order to see the effect. And then kind of other hormones to consider are kind of what we call like our reproductive hormones, which are like testosterone, estrogen, and progesterone. Testosterone is pretty well understood. If you have low T, it's kind of similar to having hypothyroidism. Your metabolism is just simply not as active. And bringing that testosterone level back up to baseline is pretty crucial. Diet-wise, there's really not a ton to do other than to eat kind of healthy fats. So like nuts, seeds, fatty fishes, olive oil, things like that help to just kind of promote those fat soluble hormones. But other than that, there's really not a whole lot to do. Again, outside of our normal things, like get enough sleep, don't smoke, don't drink, don't, or, don't drink in excess, I guess I should say. Um, eat regular meals, eat balanced meals, drink enough water, those kinds of things. All of that will certainly impact it. But in terms of like foods that will raise your testosterone specifically, there's not a ton out there. Most of that comes down to medication. When it comes to estrogen and progesterone, this is where it gets wild, right? So estrogen and progesterone definitely fluctuate. There, anybody who has a uterus will know that. They fluctuate, monthly, but also over the course of your life, they're going to fluctuate. So certainly in pregnancy is a time that we see this, but also in menopause is another time that we see this. In fact, in menopause, most people notice that they gain a pretty significant amount of abdominal fat, that is attributed to the decreased circulation of estrogen and progesterone. So it's kind of like your ovaries are shutting down for, the foreseeable future, and that's kind of what produces that fat pad in the abdominal wall. To be honest with you, and I get a lot of questions about this, there's not much you can do about that. And I hate to say that and sounds so discouraging, but I would also be lying if I told you there was. It's not so much, it's usually not a significant amount of weight in terms of pounds that people are putting on. Like it may only be like 2 to 3 pounds extra that they gain, but it's all located right in that abdominal wall. And that changes the way your body looks in space. It changes the way clothes fit. And it's really devastating to a lot of humans because they just feel like they have no control over their body. And frankly, kind of the truth is you don't. And that's, to me, that's not the problem, right? The problem isn't that you now have belly fat where you haven't before. The problem is you think that's a problem, right? The problem is you don't want it there. The problem is you've been conditioned to think belly fat is bad, even if it is just a vanity thing. And you just think, well, that's just ugly. I don't want it there. That's your poor body just living its life. Okay. Like it is just existing and you're hating it for it. I mean, what kind of message does that send to you about anything else, right? It is not impacting your health. We know that. So why is it a problem? Because it doesn't look good. Who said it doesn't look good? A bunch of motherfuckers. That's who. You could decide. You get to decide what looks good and what doesn't look good. And the reality is there's, outside of surgical means, there's truly not much you can do for it. There's evidence that, estrogen replacement, like hormone replacement therapy, can be helpful. I would also make the argument that, if you don't already, engaging in resistance training can help with that significantly. But other than that, there's not a whole lot to be done. And even those effects, they're going to be marginal. There's not going to be like all of a sudden your body looks exactly like it did 10 years ago before you went through menopause. That's not going to happen. What's going to happen is that you're going to notice a slight reduction, and a slight slimming effect in that abdominal wall. It's not going to be major. The only major way to do anything about it is surgery. And even then, most surgeons are hesitant to do it anyhow. Other things that estrogen and progesterone can affect are things like PCOS. Again, PCOS, we don't have a great understanding of it. Largely because it's a disease that's classified based on a phenotype, or like a visual of an ovary that has cysts on it. But what that actually means hormonally for different people can mean a lot of different things. So it can mean that, you have estrogen, your ovaries don't produce a lot of estrogen. It can also mean that your ovaries produce a lot of estrogen. It's just, they produce a lot all the time, and your hormones don't cycle kind of normally through the 28-day cycle that they're supposed to. So there's honestly just not nearly enough research into it. We do know that for whatever reason, estrogen and insulin do kind of go hand in hand. So people who have PCOS are sometimes at greater risk. Some are insulin resistant, some are not. So there are plenty of people who have PCOS that are not insulin resistant, have no issues with insulin. But there is a greater proportion of people with PCOS who do. So then, kind of the same things that apply to insulin resistance apply. It's going to be, a lot of times people think, oh, I have to do low carb. No, you don't. You want to do moderate carbs. So you want to eat regular meals. You want each meal to include a carb, and you want each meal to include a protein. That's kind of the rules. You can eat more than 3 meals, but you want to eat at least 3 meals. So you want to eat regular meals, and you want to make sure you're eating a carb serving at every meal. What you don't want to do is not eat all day and then eat a huge amount of carbs all at one time, because then your body can't handle that load. What you want to do is maximize how you're managing the insulin that your body does have. There's also medications to take for it. Metformin is probably the most common. Metformin is generally a very safe medication. I think some people have some reservations about it. Obviously, it's not for everybody. It's not always well tolerated. There's certainly GI side effects. But generally speaking, it's a really safe medication. It works well for a lot of people. Sometimes the approach is to regulate the hormone cycle, so to do synthetic birth controls. Again, that's not for everybody, right? That's not safe for everybody. Some people are at risk for blood clots and things like that. Some people just don't like the way birth control makes them feel. And, to an extent, you're kind of putting a Band-Aid over the problem. The problem is that your estrogen isn't circulating. But by feeding your body synthetic estrogen and giving it a fake cycle, it's not really solving the problem at the ovary level either. It's just kind of mitigating some of the symptoms. I will say that there is a growing body of evidence that D-chiro and myo-inositol are actually really beneficial supplements for people with PCOS. The dosing, I believe, is 2 grams per day. And you could buy those just about anywhere. Normally, and you guys that have been around for a while know this, I'm not a big proponent of supplement. I don't like them. They're not FDA approved. I generally don't recommend them unless there's some type of nutrient deficiency. This is probably the one and only case where I'm like, yeah, supplement's actually probably a good idea. It helps to basically the myo-inositol, from what I understand, is a precursor molecule to the estrogen, and it helps your ovaries essentially kind of create more estrogen. There is a decent amount of literature surrounding it. The problem is that at a chemical level, what you're getting in the supplement is not guaranteed to be what was demonstrated in the research study. It's not like a drug trial. But that said, there's a growing body of evidence. And I'll link a research paper below for you guys to look at as well. Because that's honestly that's kind of all we've got, right? For PCOS management. There's, again, same with testosterone, there's not a lot to do diet wise to help increase your estrogen levels, other than same thing, right? Like water, sleep, good balanced nutrition, and healthy fats. If you are insulin resistant, you want to eat kind of regular amounts of carbohydrates throughout the day, and you want to pair those carbohydrates with a protein. Outside of that, there's not a whole heck of a lot to do about it, other than the potential supplementation for myo-inositol. Excuse me. So that's kind of my quick and dirty rundown of hormones and things that can go wrong. But obviously all of these topics are much deeper and wider than I can cover in a 20-minute podcast. But I wanted to give you all just kind of a very brief overview of what you might be looking at if you suspect that your hormones are kind of out of whack. So with that, I will leave you. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will see you next time.